Hello, everybody. This is Coach Aaron Saft and the Running is Life podcast. And today's episode is just a solo episode. So I'm going to go over some things that I've learned over the past couple of weeks, months, etc., that I just wanted to share with you because they can be helpful to your own running. And some of it's stuff that we've kind of talked about and some new stuff that's coming out from that. So we'll start kind of with super shoes. The super shoes have kind of changed our sport in many ways, and I wouldn't say we can attribute it only to super shoes. Our training methodologies are fine-tuning and honing to produce such fast times and faster races, as well as surfaces on which we're running, like the different tracks surfaces. Our nutrition, we're learning more and more about nutrition, and we're going to kind of talk a little bit more about that as well. Super shoes are certainly a piece of this, but I kind of want to remind some folks about some things and maybe give you a heads up. I don't know the reality of this, but it's something to consider if you're having a problem. So here, let's just kick into it. Remember that super shoes don't work for everyone. As a matter of fact, they have a negative effect on some people. They actually make you slower. Not everyone, obviously. It's a small percentage. But if you put them on and you notice his paces are actually slower in the super shoes, then there's a few things here. Either A, that model is just not constructed for you, and that's a hard way to find out, obviously, if you are investing in such an expensive shoe, to find out that it actually has negative effects on you. So a few considerations there. Recognize what the return policy is or exchange policy. I always feel bad if I have to take a shoe back or send a shoe back. I try not to do that, but if the shoe is definitely making you slower, okay, because super shoes can have that effect for, I believe, 4% of the population that uses them. Again, that's a small percentage, but again, think about that. If you're running slower, something to consider. We also have to consider that there are non-responders to the super shoes. In other words, they have no effect. Now, again, it can be the model that you're wearing, so you could try a different model that might actually benefit you, okay? Same as the negative. You can definitely try a different shoe. And that's why I say think about the exchange or return policy to see if you can exchange it for a different type of super shoe. So knowing that up front and making sure that they do have other options that you potentially could like, that's a big deal. Right, so think about that because these things are an investment, right? Like you're spending over $200 most likely on a pair of super shoes, and with that, you're not getting much time out of them. So you want your investment to be something that's going to be beneficial to you, obviously. So but be real cognizant, be real observant, right? Like have a baseline. What am I running prior to going into the super shoe, and then what am I running post super shoe? Now, with this, it's such a new technology. I was talking to an athlete the other day that was saying that one of the college coaches is noticing lower extremity injuries because people are training in super shoes. Now, is training in super shoes necessarily a bad thing? Not necessarily, but if you are starting to notice these, as I said, kind of lower extremity, that would be like calf Achilles, that complex injuries, it's something to consider and perhaps bring up to a PT that is very familiar with biomechanics and running. And again, this isn't substantiated, it's just observational, okay? So I'm not placing blame on the shoes, I'm just stating that be cognizant, be aware, right? Like it could be a potential if you are training in them constantly. What I do suggest, as I have for a long time, no matter what type of shoe you're wearing, be it a training shoe, a racing shoe, minimalistic shoe, or maximal cushion shoe, is that you have a variety, right? A toolbox that you can go to, different stack heights, different ramps, right? So in stack heights, what I'm talking about is the amount of foam, right? So we have minimalistic footwear, we have medium cushion footwear, we have maximal cushion footwear. Okay, so it's good to have a variety of those so that you're using tendons and muscles in a different way. Same thing with the ramp. We may have a zero drop shoe, but like myself, if I run in zero drop shoes all the time, I notice that my Achilles gets a lot tighter. And that's because I'm constantly using it in a zero drop shoe more so than I would be in a higher ramp shoe. So I also have 5mm ramp shoes. And those take a little bit of tension and use my Achilles in a different way, so it's not constantly being used and overused, if you will, in my running. So having that variety, it will hopefully keep you a little bit more injury resilient, right? We're using other tendons and muscles. We're strengthening those other tendons and muscles. We're not relying on this platform like a super shoe to do all the work for us. So, be real cognizant of what you're using and how much you're using it. It's good to take these notes. How do you feel? Like, look back at your log. How many days in a row were you running in X shoe, right? Like, the shoes need to recover as well. This is something that we've talked about in the past. Shoes decompress with every use. So if you're using them on a daily basis, they're perhaps getting compressed more often than they should. They have to decompress a little bit. Now, they're never going to return to what they were when you bought them, or the previous day's use. You're squishing them infinitesimally a little bit smaller each day, right? So we're kind of compressing them down until finally the foam is just worn out. So be aware that, yes, rotating through your shoes will save your shoes and allow them to decompress a little bit fuller rather than just jumping back on them and decompressing them more, because you're going to break them down faster. Now, am I suggesting that you go out and buy, a billion pairs of shoes or two of the same pair? No. I'm just saying if you have the potential to buy two different pairs of shoes, it's good to alternate them as trainers. I like to have my athletes use the super shoe if they're training for a marathon for workouts and potentially some key long runs so that they get used to the shoe itself and use it and feel comfortable with it. But I don't want to overuse it, right? I want to have that daily trainer that they can use. So, be cognizant of all of that, right? Take your notes, write it down in your log, be observant. What's going on? What are you feeling? How are they feeling, right? I've had the Spectre 1, the Topo Spectre 1, and honestly, I just felt like my foot was just kind of bogging down. Like I wasn't getting the energy return out of it. It wasn't snapping forward like a typical shoe should, right? If you will, the rocker, just didn't rock. It just felt like it sat back at the heel and I wasn't, shifting through the shoe. It wasn't moving me or propelling me forward. Whereas now the Spectre 2, I love the transition. I did a speed workout in them yesterday. And granted, the intervals were shorter. I didn't even think about my feet, and that was on a dirt road. So, that gives me confidence in the shoe that I can move at faster paces in, relative ease and comfort, on a faster pace on a dirt road. So that's something that you should be looking for. It shouldn't feel like anything's different from your foot, right? Like it should just feel natural, like you can move fluidly and, without effort, without any extra effort. So that's what I was looking for. And the Spectre 2 has kind of met that expectations. Now the super shoes, they have the various types of Pebax foam. That's part of the story, right? And then the plate is the other story that provides the shoe with a little bit of stability and a little bit of propulsion. So, you have to figure out what works for you, what combination works for you. I find that the nylon plate, that's something like in the Spectre 2, the Topo Spectre 2, works better for me. It's not as rigid. It's a little bit more flexible. I tried something like the Nike, I think at the time it was like the 4%, and the carbon plate is just too rigid for me. My foot strike is very lateral. I stay to the outside in my whole foot cycle, the whole foot gait cycle. So we have landing, flat foot where the foot gets into the kind of midfoot of the shoe, and then toe off. All throughout, I typically stay towards my pinky toe. And with a carbon plate, it exacerbated that. It made me stay more laterally, which put a lot of tension and pressure on the exterior of my leg, the lateral side of my leg. And what I found is that in my long runs, it began to aggravate my IT band. And again, observational, right? Like, okay, well, that was it, one run. I was like, like the IT band kind of locked up there. That's weird. That doesn't typically happen. And I typically don't have problems with my IT band. So I was like, okay, noted, right? So then a few weeks later, I did another key long run, used my super shoes to try to, see if they were going to work for me. And I hadn't had any problems in between the last long run and this with my IT band once it calmed down. And it resurfaced, wearing these shoes once again late in the run. So it began to be a red flag to me, right? So I was like, all right, let's let the IT band calm down. I'll give it one more try. And on that last try, sure enough, IT band resurfaced. Okay, shoes are really not doing it for me. And that's where I had to, widen my search to determine, is there something out there that could work for me that feels comfortable? When I tried the Spectre, the original Spectre, it was very comfortable. I liked the fit, the shape. It's just I didn't necessarily like the function, as I described. So now that the Spectre 2 is out, they seem to have resolved that, and I really like it. Now, as I always say, I have no affiliation to any company. That's why I love being able to talk about all of these brands. There are fantastic brands out there, and there is a brand that's right for you. And that brand that's right for you is the one that functions and feels the most comfortable. So there's no best, right? Like, well, I shouldn't say that. When they test these things, yes, there are ones that provide to the super responders so much more benefit. We talked about the non-responders. There are super responders. So those are the people that excel with these shoes. So whereas like if we talk about 4% improvement, there might be super responders that get even more benefit from the shoe. So, there are responders, super responders, and you're looking for being a responder to the shoe. That's the key here. Be a responder to the shoe and, make sure that it's serving you. It's not bothering you, right? I talked about the lower extremity injuries. To me, it manifested in my IT band, which was on the outside medial part of my knee, the upper part of my knee, kind of just to the top left or top outside, if you will, of my patellar. I was grabbing my left leg, which you couldn't see. So, so be cognizant of how it's functioning for you. Okay. So super shoes, that's one kind of thing that I've been listening to, learning about, and just want to state because there are more and more people using them, and, be appropriate with your use of them. Sure, we do recover faster from them. That's true. And that's a great part of using them, but we should use them as a tool, not as a constant. Now they're starting to make these daily trainer super shoes, which, obviously is an interesting concept. The same things that I just talked about with the super shoes obviously should be applied to the super trainer. Be real cognizant, be real observant of what's going on when you use these shoes. Okay. If new pain surface, recognize, this popped up. Maybe use a different trainer, let it calm down, and then go back to your super trainer or your super shoe. See if it resurfaces, just as I did with my IT band. If so, start to question it, right? Give it a few uses. If it keeps popping up, then I really would red flag it, right? And hopefully you can do that within the exchange or return window so that you can get something that works for you. But again, make sure they have other options that would be suitable for you, or can order them and will still exchange for you. Okay, so make sure you ask that prior to the purchase. This is a huge purchase. That is a lot of money. It is an investment. It can be worth it, but we want it to be right for you. Okay? All right. Other gear things. My coach Ryan, who was on last week, Ryan has been fantastic. I love, hearing from other coaches. I hope you really took some stuff away from our talk last week. Ryan has been sharing some great resources with me, and I really appreciate that. It's been super, super nice and refreshing to kind of get some insight from other coaches and hear, what resources they have. Ryan sent me, a great, kind of, summary of pole use, because we're practicing with poles. As we talked about, those are going to be super important for my Brutes Challenge attempts. So we're practicing multiple times with the poles, and Ryan talked about there's 3 different types of pole use, and he sent me the video. I'll try to include the video in the show notes. I'm going to make a note to do that with pole use. You've got your rhythm poles, you've got your non-rhythm. Okay, so rhythm is with each step. Non-rhythm, you take about 3 running steps in between each pole stab, and then you've got your double stab where you're using both poles together simultaneously, striking at the same point in front of you on either side of you. So there's 3 different strikes, and getting to know those and when to use those makes you a more efficient runner. Okay, so if you've never used poles or you're planning on using poles, just as we're doing, you should be training with them, right? So right now, I'll give you an example. It being the end of fall here, leaves are all over the place. We've had the destruction of our trails due to the hurricane. So there's just a lot of debris and, new rocks and new roots exposed because of all the trees that have been uprooted. So our trails are a mess, but you can't see that mess, because of the leaf litter. So with that, I've really gone and try to be more proactive in using my poles when I go out onto the trails, because it provides me and my ankle more stability, right? If it starts to go, I just plant my poles, I do that double stab and kind of lift myself so that my ankle doesn't go over. Now we have to be really careful with poles, right? There are times where, it may not be suitable to use a pole. For instance, like a really steep technical downhill, you may want your hands, and you have to have a way to put those away. And that's something you have to think about. Where are you going to store your poles if you need to put those away, right? I have a quiver. So I have Solomon packs, and I have a Solomon quiver that attaches to it. There are waist belts out there that have the belt loops. Ultra Aspire has one of those. I'm sure there's a billion things out in the market. I know the Naked belts have, toggles that you can put your poles in. So there's a ton of options out there. But, think about how are you going to store your poles when they're not in use, and how accessible are they? And practice with that. And that's something we've been doing, is practicing. So, even if I just go on a dirt road, I practice putting in and out my poles. I'll carry those to make sure. And getting used to that weight and your pack weight, right? So some of these runs, as Ryan and I were talking about, they're going to require me to carry more gear, and you have to get used to carrying that weight. Get your body used to not only using the poles, but the weight of your pack. Okay. So good things to be practicing throughout, right? It's always okay, on your long runs to practice with that stuff, right? But start out easy, right? So, in other words, we don't want to say, okay, so I'm going to be carrying, let's just say it's, 10 pounds of weight, right? On your first run that you're going to practice the weight, don't load it up with 10 pounds because your body's not used to that yet. So load it up with something, maybe 4 pounds, right? And see how that feels. Get used to that weight. Once you've done some runs and your body's like, yeah, I'm okay with this weight, you can, increase it to 6 pounds, right? Don't jump up huge. Go up a little bit at a time and practice your weight. Okay. Practice carrying that weight. Practice putting in and out your poles from wherever you're storing them. Practice your different uses of the poles, the 3 different types that we were talking about. Those are all things that will make you more efficient and less to think about on race day. Okay. Or on, whatever given event, like the Blue Challenge for me. So just be as efficient and proficient as you can at pole use, and pack weight. Right? You don't want your goal event to be the first time that you've experienced this amount of weight, right? That's something to practice over time. You can do it in your medium long run if you have one during the week, as well as in your long run. And then as it gets closer, you're probably going to want to do it even more often. It's hard during a workout to do that. I'd probably say on workout days or days with speed, sure, it's okay to carry your pack and carry some weight, but I would not carry obviously full weight. You want your workout to be, obviously to be good, to be beneficial. And you're probably going to have a different form with a heavier pack than you want if you're going to be working out, which can lead to injury. So we have to be really careful with that. And I think pole use, especially with the heavy pack, can be, a great advantage to help with that weight distribution and moving forward and kind of maintaining upright posture and not changing the way that you're running. But it might, depending on the weight. So that's what you have to figure out. So don't let your event be the first time that you're experiencing the carrying weight. Okay. Right on. So again, I'll put that poll video in there. I want to thank Ryan for sharing that with me because it's really helpful. Something that I'll probably share with my athletes as well. The other thing, and this has been kind of a big topic lately, and I've heard it throughout different podcast platforms, and it's there's some really interesting things coming out with the amount of carbohydrates, obviously, that people are taking in. And I just did lessons that we can learn from David Roche, but I want to kind of talk about. Just as I was just talking about with pack weight, it's the same thing with nutrition. And there was a really great Finn Melanson, his podcast. I'll try to put Finn's podcast episodes. It's 2 episodes about nutrition. He's got a great dietitian on there, but they kind of talk through this. And like I said, great podcast to listen to because just as I was saying with pack weight. With nutrition, we want to start at a reasonable amount of grams of carbohydrates per hour, right? So we're focusing on perhaps maybe 30 to 40 grams of carbohydrate per hour. That's the low end of the range anyway. And then we do a few weeks at 30 to 40 grams of carbohydrate and see how we feel. Note how you feel so you can go back and see your notes. If you're okay after potentially 2 to 3 weeks of doing 30 to 40 grams of carbohydrate per hour, then you want to increase ever so slightly. 5 to 10 grams of carbohydrate per hour is the suggestion of this dietitian. Again, listen to the episode because he's got some really good ideas and principles and guidelines to kind of make this work for you. What I did and why I think it did not work for me is that all of a sudden I jumped to 60 grams of carbohydrate per hour, and my gut just wasn't ready for that. It was advice that let's try 60 grams, whereas before I wasn't doing nearly that much, and my gut just wasn't ready for it. Again, we have to train the gut to be ready for any substantial amount of carbohydrates per hour. And what they suggest is that in your daily life, the more carbohydrates you eat, the more efficient you are at using those calories. So we don't want to be restrictive in our diet of carbohydrates. Now we don't want to overdo it, obviously. So watch your macros. Again, consult like a dietitian if you're wondering what your daily carbohydrate intake should look like. But the more we practice eating carbohydrates and the amount of carbohydrates that we eat per hour in a run, the better and more proficient we're going to be. So follow along your progress, right? So once you've bumped up, let's say now you're at 45 to 50 grams of carbohydrate per hour, maybe even a little less, depending on where you started. Then spend a few weeks there. If everything's okay, if your gut says it's okay, and you feel like okay, my body's responding well to this, then again bump up another maybe 5 grams, right? Just incrementally bumping it up. So you're starting way away from your potential goal event, right? We're starting this way early in the training cycle, even in the base phase, right? And then growing ever so slightly and experiencing, okay, this is how I felt. If you start to have GI issues, you have to take a look. Is it too much grams per carbohydrates per hour? Is it too much of one source? That's another thing it could be, right? So we have different sources of carbohydrates, different sugars that we can process, glucose, fructose, maltodextrose, right? So looking at these various chains of carbohydrates, which ones are working best for us? So there's a lot even within that, right? So being considerate of what you're eating, how much you're eating, and of what type of carbohydrate are you trying to process. And so look at all of that and make sure that you're not just going one type of sugar on throughout. They talk about how it's good to mix up the different types the longer that you go, right? And also looking at the effort, how hard the effort is. Now, a marathoner is going to burn through those more quickly. So, perhaps that higher carbohydrate range is going to be better and more beneficial for the runner. Maybe not. It depends on the person. Everybody's different, but that's what you have to figure out, right? In a 100-miler, if you're hiking a lot, right? Heart rate isn't very high, then you're not burning through carbohydrate as frequently. And that's why it's good to practice your pacing plan, right? Practice how fast you're going to go. Practice, if you're going to run walk, practice your run walk. See how that goes, and you'll have to see, do I need as many carbohydrates as I've been training my gut for? Because you're going to be out there for a long period of time, and they also get into that piece of it. Being out there for so long, you're probably going to want to have some different sources and some different macros in there rather than solely carbohydrates. So things to think on. And this is always a great conversation to have with the dietitian and figure out what are your macros, how much should you be taking over the course of over a race, right? Looking at the demands of the race. If it's a flat race and you're going to be running a lot more, then those demands are going to be completely different than if you're in a mountain race and you're going to be hiking a lot more. Okay. You may still have the effort because it's an uphill, but these are things to take into consideration and discuss with a registered dietitian. Okay. So some things to think on there. The other thing that I found interesting, and let's see, where this came from, Fuel for the Soul, and I'll try to put that one in there too. So Fuel for the Soul, they had this episode, and it was like, it was Ask Heather. No, not Heather. Well, her nickname is Feathers. Anyway, they ask, and she's a registered dietitian. They ask her questions, and then she responds. And I think she brought up a great point. When we look at our sports nutrition, it can either say supplemental facts or nutritional facts. Now, if it says nutritional facts, you can trust it a little bit more so because there is a lot more restrictions, guidelines that they have to follow in order for it to be packaged and say nutritional facts. Whereas supplemental facts, if it says that on your wrapper, that should throw up a red flag because there are not really any guidelines, any supervision of supplements. You're not going to see your typical certifications for food guidelines on these because they are not I would say a food-based product, so you have to be careful, right? And that's why I say look for it to say nutritional facts so you know exactly what's in there. Supplemental facts, that can get very skewed. You may not even know. It just may say, and they talk about, it may say proprietary blend, which you have no idea what is in that. So be real careful. Read your labels. Read what's on there. But they had some other really great topics they talked about in that episode. As I said, it was kind of a Q&A. Really enjoyed that episode. Again, I'll put that in the show notes. You can have a listen. Check out Finn's podcast, and actually it's 2 episodes. There's some really great stuff in there about nutrition as we find out more about how much the body can do and really how much you and I should be really doing over the course of our races and events. Okay. So, lots there. Very, very good stuff. Okay. The last thing that I kind of want to touch on here is we've got the holidays approaching, right? This is the time of year where it's tough to be, restrictive. I don't want to say restrictive, but to be cognizant and behaved when we eat, right? This is typically the time where we go to holiday meals and we have desserts, and I just want to remind you, everything in moderation. It's fine to eat desserts, but again, everything within has its limits. Not that you have to restrict yourself, but be real mindful so you don't have that remorse, the holiday remorse that, oh man, I picked up a few extra pounds. But be thinking of that now. Have a plan going into that now, right? Like, It's okay. I know mom's going to make my favorite apple pie. I'm just going to have a slice of that, and that's it, right? I know we're having a big Thanksgiving dinner, but I'm gonna hold off on seconds. I'm gonna fill my plate with the good stuff and just have a plate full, right? Rather than saying, oh, I'm going for seconds or thirds. Be mindful of that. That's a tough tough feat, I know, at this time of year, but be conscious of that, right? It's just a reminder so that we don't have that remorse. The second piece of that is the holidays typically bring stress. If you're a parent, there's a lot that happens within the holidays because you don't want to disappoint your kids or your family. There's a lot of stress that comes along with that, and recognize that. Recognize, maybe today is not the day to go out for a run. I remember some mornings being up till 2:30, 3 a.m., building and wrapping and trying to get ready for Christmas morning. And then, getting maybe 2 hours sleep and then trying to squeeze my run in before the kids woke up so that I could celebrate Christmas Day. And then Christmas Day, I ended up just being so wiped out. I should have just slept, right? So consider all of that. Consider everything that's going into the holidays, the stresses that come along with it. I know some people can be stressed out by going to visit, right? Like it can be a stressful event. Maybe their families stress them out, unfortunately. So recognize all of that and take that into consideration in your training. And maybe a run is good for you in that case, but maybe it's not what you had planned on the docket, right? Like, I don't want to do too much today. I don't want to be too tired. Save it for another day, right? But anyhow, just some things to consider around the holidays. I hope everybody has wonderful holidays. We've got another week here until Thanksgiving. I certainly wish everybody a very, very happy Thanksgiving. I am super grateful for all of you for listening. I appreciate all of your feedback, all of your comments. I really do appreciate everything. Other than that, we had a wonderful weekend. I got to go to Cary with my son and daughter and watch them both run their first 2 mile on the track. Keegan set an indoor school record for our high school. He ran 9:21. I was very proud of him. We were shooting for maybe a 9:19, so to hit 9:21, I was very proud of him. He had to really run the race kind of more or less. He had to push the pace in order to get that. He took fourth, but again, I was so proud of him for that effort, especially, at the end of cross country. We hadn't really even trained much on the track or done much, in the way of specific speed for the track. So, I think there's exciting things to come. He's racing in Foot Locker next weekend, November 30th. My daughter, she PR'd in the 2 mile. This was, again, her first time on the track doing a 2 mile, but, I was super, super proud of her. A fantastic effort. And then one of our girls from the high school, she set a 2 mile PR as well at a different event in Winston-Salem, setting a school record for us as well. So I'm super proud, as always, of my kids, my team, all the members. We're heading to Nike this weekend. Nike is in Cary, North Carolina. It's the Southeast Regionals. And my son's not racing this weekend. He's going to take this weekend off and focus on Foot Locker. My daughter is just going to run the community race. She wanted to experience it, so we're going to go and watch. Keegan's going on an official college visit on Sunday and Monday. Super excited for that. We got to go to NC State and see my old coach and sit down and chat with him. Keegan actually had a follow-up call today. He's at school now, so I hadn't had a chance to talk to him about how it went, but I'm eager to hear what he had to say. There's new restrictions for those that don't know. Each conference is responsible for putting their own caps on the number of athletes each team can have. The ACC has capped cross country at 17 members. That's much better than what the SEC has done. The SEC has capped cross country at 10 runners and 35 track members. That's a travesty. That is just obnoxious. That is ridiculous. Upsetting, obviously, to restrict teams to that sort of numbers. The ACC, thankfully, and again, they can still decide to restrict further. So that is our only concern, is the restrictions that are placed on each school as to whether, they have roster spots, which is a big concern as the NCAA continues to evolve and do whatever it's doing now. It's nothing like, what I ran in back in college. And that's something that, Coach Geiger and I discussed, was how different it is now, and, how it's changed. So, definitely a topic of conversation for another time, but it was really interesting to hear his perspective. We also went over to Wake Forest and had a tour from Rocky Hansen. For those of you that don't know, Rocky ran here in Western North Carolina. I was his coach for track in middle school, and then he went to the Christ School, had a very successful career, breaking 4 minutes in the mile, one of the top runners in the nation in high school, and now one of the top collegiate runners. So very proud of Rocky. He's a sophomore now at Wake Forest. He gave us a tour of the campus. It was beautiful. Beautiful campus. We wanted Keegan to see it. I don't know if he'll, continue to pursue that. It's very, very challenging. The Wake Forest men just won the ACC championship, so it's a very, very highly competitive team. The standards of making the team are quite high, as they are for NC State and multiple other top Division I tiered teams. But we're learning through this process. I'll be interested to see what this coach has to say on Sunday and Monday. Looking forward to that experience as well. So, and man, it's the end of the year, so I guess it's that time that people are looking at 2025 and accomplishing their goals. So I've had a lot of people reach out about coaching. I sincerely appreciate that. It's fantastic. Once I get a better feel for what my roster looks like, because I have a lot of conversations actually this week that are on my call schedule to discuss, the potential of coaching. And I have a few more coming on board. I'll have to see what my openings look like. So if you're interested, please reach out, and we'll kind of see what my availability looks like. But it would be great to have the conversation to even decide whether I'm the right coach and you're the right athlete for me. Okay. So please, reach out. All of my communications are in the show notes, so feel free to check that out. We are, revamping my website, adding some new information and resources. So there's a lot of things going on as we approach the new year. As always, thank you guys for reaching out. Please continue to do so. I love the feedback. I love hearing your comments and your questions. Happy to answer whatever questions you may have. So please, even if you're a coach and have some questions, if you want to reach out privately and ask questions to me about coaching advice, please, that's what I'm here for. I am a resource for coaches and athletes alike. I love to continue to grow in this sport and grow as a coach. I do the same. I ask other questions to coaches and get their feedback, and like to hear new ideas as well. So, please, it should be a shared community, as we do with everything. So, let's continue to grow together. Thank you guys for listening today. We'll have the next episode coming out on Thanksgiving Day. So, if that doesn't make it to your ears before that, then I want to wish everybody once again a very happy Thanksgiving. I have a lot to be grateful for, and you all are a part of that. So thank you, my friends. Until next time, keep moving forward, my friends. Running is life.